And, you know, when you're using other people's money, you know, a lot of times like, hey, like people will say like, oh, I don't have any reserves because I'm using other people's money. But the whole point is, is if you run into some sort of a roadblock or, you know, an emergency, you know, we had,
What's going on, everybody? I am so excited. Thanks for checking out another episode here on our private money lending show, where we talk about practices, safe practices, what to do, what not to do, and how to put capital to work in real estate. Again, this is just educational. You have to do your own due diligence, but I'm always excited to have people like Damien, our guest for today, talking about private money lending in the space of real estate. Damien, thank you, man, for being a guest here today and taking your time away from family business on a Friday to talk about private money lending, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on here. It's great.
This is awesome, man. Well, I'm excited to have our conversation. You know, I at the beginning, I always want to ask, you know, us as entrepreneurs or just people getting into this business, what got you into real estate, Damien? Like, was it like these amazing portfolio of properties that you dreamed about? Was it these like RV parks that you were going to get into? What was that, Damien, that got you into that curiosity of
Oh,
real
yeah,
estate?
nothing glamorous at all, and it's pretty boring. But so, um, you know, I worked a regular 9 to 5 job. This is back in 2002, so you know, 23 years ago, and there was, you know, a guy that I worked with that was buying a 3-family house, and you know, he was saying that's like, hey, he's buying this house, he's basically living for free. And, you know, I'm a young guy in my early 20s, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, you know, I've lived in triple deckers like when I was a kid and everything. And, you know, the landlord would come and get the money, and he didn't really do too much. You know, you'd see him painting and stuff. I was like, oh, this is a great income. If I had a couple of these, you know, like maybe it would have to work someday. And that's really like kind of what got me started. It was, and the guy had a lender that actually physically came into the office. And now this is back in 2002 when it was more personal, and you know, people signed documents. There was no DocuSign and everything. And this is back when people even used to go into the real estate office to still look at the books. The books came out with all the pictures of the houses and everything. It wasn't, there was no really like Zillow back then, realtor.com. Few local websites would have stuff, but it was really localized and in person back then. So, you know, I just got to talking to the loan officer from him coming in, working with this other guy. And it just seems like mind blowing that a loan officer would come into an office building to talk to the employees. But that's really how I got into it. And I wound up buying a condo and renting out one of the bedrooms. And this is back when I was software engineer, first year out of school. I was only making 50 grand something a year. So, and buying a 3-family house was like, oh, the down payment, it's, yeah, you know, probably would have been like 10 grand, but that was like $1 million to me back then.
Oh, for sure.
The condo, I think, I mean, I probably was out of pocket only a few $1,000s and stuff with the closing. And then, you know, I rented the bedroom out. So my expenses were pretty low. And then I bought another condo off there the next year because there was huge appreciation at that time in the Boston area between 2002 all the way up to 2008, really. But for condos specifically, 2002 to 2004, there was a massive you know, increase in value for condos. So that's really how I got into it. It's nothing glamorous or anything. We didn't have any of these groups, or I just didn't know where they were. Like, you know, on the meetup.com didn't exist back then.
Right.
YouTube, I don't think existed at that. No, YouTube wasn't even around at that time. So, like, I didn't even think that there was investor groups or anything. That's all kind of I knew. It was like, hey, you know, a renter can pay the mortgage, right, for you, and then you get some extra, right? So that's really all I knew at the time. And you know, my experiences growing up and having landlords and stuff, and seeing them collect the money and stuff, and you know, nothing glamorous. That's it, really.
That is so awesome, Damien. You know, you just started by curiosity. You're like, dude, that guy's making money and doesn't look too complicated.
Yeah.
Just collecting some extra cash, you know, from the rent. I love it. So always keep it simple, right? Nowadays, to your point, right? There's like a lot of technology. There's a lot of like Facebook groups, YouTube, and all these other sources that sometimes overcomplicate things, right? And I love the way you just keep it simple. So I'm curious though for you to dive in a little bit into that first condo that the first condo you kind of house hacked, right? Because you rented a room. The second condo, how did that feel? Was it more like, man, all right, it's kind of uncertainty because now you're not in that condo. Now you're just renting it to potentially two individuals or a family. What did that go through your mind? To me, it looks like you're simple and you're going to keep it simple, but I'm just curious, how did that go through?
Yeah, like it was a little scary, right? Because it's like now I'm used to renting out the room, right? And now I'm renting it out to this entire family. Not only did I, I bought my first investment property, but it was actually out of town. It was actually in Providence, Rhode Island, which could be, no traffic could be 45 minutes, but with traffic could be an hour and a half, right? So it was basically a remote rental, and the whole thing is like, wow, these condos in Boston went way up, and it's much easier to afford one in Rhode Island. So that's why I bought one there. And Providence was a major city to me before I really traveled out, and I been to like Atlanta, Philadelphia, like and stuff like that. But they have jobs and everything, and it's the capital of Rhode Island. But yeah. It was a lot different, right? Because, I had to, find the tenants, and this was all me doing it myself, advertising,
Right.
vetting tenants. And I was lucky that I bought a condo and I became friends with the property manager there. And,
Nice.
I just asked him for tips on how to vet the tenants and stuff. And then the first tenant I found myself, but eventually, he became the property manager, and I sort of greased him out a little bit with stuff, an official property manager, because he had an on-site maintenance person too. So what happens there too is like they'll call the they used to call me, and then I would call if I thought it was an issue with the condominium itself, and then I would call the condominium. So I would be talking to this property manager, and we actually switched it to where my tenants would actually call them first, and they would call me. And then it was to the point where it's like, hey, anything under $100, just do it and bill me. So it became like a really remote management situation, and where it was just mailbox money for that. But it was a learning process over time. And it was a big pain driving back and forth to Providence, Rhode Island. It'd be after work. It would be me going to Home Depot. It would be me painting. It would be me fixing leaks in the bathroom, and stuff like that. And all the tenant turnover stuff, it was myself and my friends doing it. I had a friend in Rhode Island, or a girlfriend, and who became an ex-girlfriend, and she actually still helped me, and with the painting and the cleaning and stuff, tenant turnovers there. Obviously I paid her some money, but that's how it started out. And I was just over broke, for a long time during those early years. So,
dude, that is pretty awesome, man. Building the relationship with property management, learning those skills, right? How to talk to property management and understand what it's needed, because as you start acquiring, other properties that are potentially remotely further away, you understand what that involves. So take us from those two condos to, did you acquire any others? Did you go into like fix and flip world? How did that transition look like?
So probably about maybe 5 years later, I acquired a third, right? So I'm going like very, very slow. And then I was in a relationship where, 2008 happened, right? And I'm not sure how it is on other parts of the country, but in Boston, between 2008 and 2013, real estate was just going down and down, the value. And, just the perception of everybody was that real estate is a bad investment. And I was in a relationship, and she definitely convinced me to get rid of all our properties, and we bought like a single family house. with that. So I went from up to 3 to 0. And then it wasn't until I got out of the relationship, it was the first thing I did was buy a two-family house and moved to, over in New Jersey where I lived in it again. And then, short story, like now I'm up to 15, since 2018. So probably not as fast as other people going, but, slow and steady. I don't have any partners in these. They're all mine. That's, one good thing about it. And I'm constantly using that to show equity, and I'll get a loan from a private money lender and I'll put it on one house and I'll use it for another project. It's great when you have multiple properties. And even if you want to go in with partners, you should always have properties of your own, so you can kind of do these things with lenders and you can give them equity on cash flowing properties that have renters in it too. So, but yeah, the one thing that really got me into, my next level was that, I was a software engineer. We make decent money and stuff like that. I had to evict somebody that was a close family friend. I've known the family in Boston for, about 20 years, over 20 years. And it was the cousin that lived in the New York area. They were living in my second unit. I had to evict them, and it was very rough, like to say the least. And ironically, I got a pep talk from the sister of my tenant, who I've known for 20 years, and she's also an investor. And she started saying, "Hey, you got to take this seriously." And that's when I started joining groups. I found I was living in New Jersey anyways, and I'm new there, so it was like, okay, this is a way for me to also socialize like locally in New Jersey and meet more people too. So I got into some pretty good circles in New Jersey, which brought me into Philadelphia, right? And then I started buying properties over there in Philly too. And that's when I got serious, and I just got like addicted to education, and I'm in like 10 different groups or something. And yeah, I don't really have allegiance to any kind of group. I did sponsor CORE for a while. So I'm pretty close to that group, but yeah, I've wound up, learning how to do all sorts of things: short sales, lending, buying properties creatively, subject to seller financing. And, for a while I had a transaction coordination company. I've been a real estate broker for 20 years, which I didn't mention too. I just use that mostly for myself and for other investors primarily. I don't really advertise it too much, but I have right now 2 listings only right now, and mostly I'll just have like 1 or 2 going on. I don't have like 20 and team of agents under me. I have 2 people under me and 1 person like that needs to pay up and do their courses to be under me in New Jersey. So I have PA and New Jersey agents working for me. So,
dude, look at that. That's amazing, man. How you just shared your journey. Thank you, man, for, going from that 2 condo to 15, and then expanding into all these other communities, right? And continuously growing in knowledge. There's definitely so much knowledge out there when it comes to real estate, from the acquisition side to the exit strategy on how these properties are going to be used. And in between those, in all of these types of transactions, money's required, right? And you mentioned lending a few minutes ago, and I think it's a perfect time to pivot into that lending journey, right? You said how you could use some of the property to put in partners in there and put them in with equity, and they can earn some cash flow, their money secured against the asset. Before we dive into details like that, tell us a little bit, were you initially like a private money lender, or did you started acquiring and that was one of your strategies to put other people's money to work? How did that journey become in the lending space?
So yeah, this is very interesting. So I had a software consulting company for a while, and at that time I was very cash heavy, and we had there was an investor in one of my Philly groups that really was stuck in a draw, right? So he had a hard money loan and he was renovating. He he had some issues with the contractor. He switched contractors. The new contractor had to rip out work and redo it. And he was kind of stuck paying the contractor to the point where he would get it inspected and the next draw would be released out of the hard money loan. So he needed 15,000. I think he needed a little less than that. It was like 12. And I'm like, okay, why don't we just make it 15? And that was my first time lending experience. So, obviously that there was a lot of learning and stuff in there. But the thing about it is that I know that I've known him for a year, and I've known and I knew him for a year at the time, and I knew his mentor for 2 years, and both of us had the same mentor. Shout out to Hone Houdini Ty in Philly, and I was part of his group, and still work with him to this day. But Hone actually went to grammar school with this gentleman. So, I was able to do like all sorts of background checks and everything like that. And I felt comfortable. We're in the group. We share experiences. We share contractors. We share property managers. We do deals with each other all the time. And so that was my first my first loan. And I was also coached by another mentor I had too, because like, as I said, I was only in 2 groups at that time, but I leverage people from
absolutely
different areas and stuff. So, with those 2 mentors and people in the group, I was able to do my first private money loan. And ironically, I got the note and mortgage myself, which, from one of the mentors that, their note and mortgage that they use, which I probably would not do and suggest people to do that. I would probably suggest them to have an attorney write their first note and mortgage, at least for the first time, until you're more comfortable with it. Like myself, I write all my notes and mortgages in the states that I understand. But if I were to do a loan in Nevada, I would not. I would have an attorney write it for me. And at least get that consulting in there. Cause I know what to ask the attorney. I say hey, I use a confession of judgment here. How does confession of judgment work in Las Vegas, in Nevada, right? Right. And I could have those conversations with the attorney and, how does the late fee work? Are we under usury and stuff like that? But as my first loan, I didn't know, ask those questions at all. But it actually went pretty well for the most part. But there was a point where he actually had to come to me and say hey, this is we extended it once, and from 6 months to 9 months, and then he came to me and said hey, I'm sort of stuck again, and I'm trying to sell this property to this other guy, and I'm short 5,000. And so we actually, and I said, you know what, let's do, because he'd been paying, and he was a good borrower and stuff like this. And I actually said, let's do like an air note. I'll satisfy it, and we'll do an air note, which is non-collateral, which again, I don't suggest anybody do this. And this is kind of what we call a financial friend, if you know that term. At this point, he actually works for a pest control company. He's I've had issues in Philly with my properties. He's come right out and he's done it himself after work, and helped me out there. So we've worked with, each other during the time. Nobody was hiding from each other, and there was all that bad blood. So I was comfortable with that. And the irony of that too is that, we were trying to figure out ways to how he was going to pay me back. And then he actually had another property, which he thought he bought, but he didn't. It was really, because we were going to, I was helping him. I actually did DSCR loans for, I was a loan broker for another company for a while. And so I was like, okay, let's sell this or refinance this to get my money out. But then when we looked at the title, he wasn't even on title. And he goes, I do. I'm like, yeah, but you're supposed to take the deed, The irony of it too was, I actually, so instead of him putting the property and deeding it to himself, I actually bought the property from the owner, and he took the wholesaler's spot, and he made this massive wholesale fee out of it, and then he paid me after the closing out of his wholesale fee.
Wow.
Obviously, the paperwork, like wasn't done correctly on this. But when you're doing deals with your financial friends, sort of, you can get around some of that stuff, and you build trust with people. But I would definitely, if somebody brought that to me, I'd be like, no, and I would probably restructure it some other way and stuff like this. But when you're working with people like and trust, sometimes you can bend the rules a little bit. And again, too, this was only $15,000, but I still have that property today. And right now the loan to value is like 40% loan to value on that.
Wow.
And and so I advertise that all the time to lenders. I'm like, I could cross collateralize with this guy. It's worth like $250, and the loan's only 130 on it. So,
dude, that is pretty awesome, man. I'm gonna take you back a little bit because you shared so much knowledge in there, right? As far as when you're new into real estate and you have capital and you want to put it to work. One of the things, right, it's vetting that borrower. And Damien had done his due diligence on that aspect at the beginning, right? Because it's one of the most important things. And yes, you do join communities, but at the same time, you just can't trust 100%, right?
right.
So that was huge. So make sure you guys do your due diligence on the borrower, understand, hey, what type of business is he doing? Like what types of project is he involved, and how you could potentially make up for that if something were to go south. And then the other thing, right, is when it comes to promissory notes and the mortgage deeds, to Damien's point, if you're new into real estate, yes, please have an attorney or a title company draft that information. It just costs a few $100. It's well worth it. They understand the state you're dealing with as far as like usury laws for late fees or anything like that. Make sure you get that, once you have maybe 10, 15 under your belt, if you choose to do it, you're more than welcome to. But if you're starting, right, and you want to lend capital, make sure you use that. And then the other thing I wanted to take away was that he used his mentors, right, and bounced that private money loan around and got their thoughts out of that. It's so important because sometimes if you don't ask the right questions, you may be in a bad deal, right? You bet at the borrower 100%, but if you don't ask questions, and sometimes we don't know what the questions are, but just present the deal to them and be like, hey, I want to lend money on this. What do you see? That's so important right there.
Yeah. Another thing too is like, I have that presentation I told you about, the Be the Bank, and it's grown over the years. And as I keep learning, I didn't really, the first time I presented that, I didn't really know the usury laws and too much. And so like I never spoke on that, but now that's like one of the first things I check. If I attempt to do like a loan in another state, like I'll look up what usury is. And the funny thing is like people know how to do taxes, right? And they'll say, and the way people do taxes is like, if I get audited, I do my taxes because I want to pass an audit and to do them right. But they don't do that. A lot of people, the newer private lenders, don't do that with their loans. Like what I mean by that is like, if I have to foreclose, right, I need my documents correctly, right? Or if I want to sell my note to a note investor, right? Like the better documentation and the more due diligence you do and better your collateral file, right? You're going to be able to sell the note at a higher value, but you're also going to be able to foreclose too,
So true.
Yeah. So you do your due diligence, make sure you're under usury. Because there's been people, and we're in some groups that we see some of this stuff coming in all the time, is where they made usurious loans, right? And sometimes they're hidden in JV agreements, and sometimes they're hidden in option agreements, but they can easily be pierced by by a judge, some of these JVs and option agreements. And if they're just a regular promissory note and mortgage and they're usurious, you know, if the borrower stops paying, you go to foreclose, and the borrower says like, "Hey, I'm getting a foreclosure attorney, and I'm going to challenge the validity of this note." Then you know you could be in trouble, and the judge could totally throw the note out, and worse comes to worse, make you pay back you know, any interest that you collected potentially or something like that on it. So any profit that you made on it too, potentially, that they could have you pay back the borrower, which is you know, really crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah, it's so important, yeah, to understand where you're lending. You have to understand the laws of that state when it comes to usury. So that's an excellent point. You mentioned, you know, be the bank. So let's dive into that. You know, you said you started teaching how people can be the bank. What does that mean, be the bank? Does that mean like, hey, I have like a whole bunch of money in my savings account? Or, I mean, what does that mean? Help us unpack that a little bit more, Damien.
Yeah. So basically, being the bank is sort of like what I just said. Be the bank, and if you go into, you know, you walk down the street, Main Street, USA, in any town, really, the banks are always the nicest buildings you see. And you think about like the work that you put into stuff, like what does a fix and flipper do, right? They have to buy materials. They have to go and check on the contractors. They have to make sure the work is done. Is the work done right? Permits, all this other stuff. Now, when you're a lender, all you're doing is writing paper and collecting money. So it's such an easy thing to do. And being the bank is just like, hey, a lot of people don't know you can do this, but you're just a person, and you're just doing exactly what banks do. They're taking the money that they have, and they're lending it to somebody else for some reason, and that other person is doing all the labor and the hard work around it, and you're just collecting the money. It's total, mailbox money for the most part, unless they stop paying, and then you got to deal with them. But if you have a good borrower that always pays on time, it's like gold, right? But you know,
Right.
as the other responsibilities of the bank too, right? If they stop paying, you know, you have the power to foreclose, and you know, you have to follow those laws, and you potentially will foreclose. It will go to auction. You may may even have to take the property back yourself. So it's not complete mailbox money, but it's a lot closer than being a renovator or a flipper or a landlord, say.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, because you know, if you could, we call it passive, right? Passive income, because to a certain point, you are just putting that capital to work, and the contractor or the builder or the buy and hold investor, they're the ones that are actually more actively in that business, that are, you know, really the stewards of your money, right? And they're really putting your capital to work. So to your point, finding that borrower that is like, you know, amazing, and they pay on time, yeah, that's a pretty sweet deal.
Yep.
When you get that, when you get that mailbox money in. You know, one thing, Damon, a lot of people think about though, it's like, hey, you know, I don't have like a lot of savings, right? People don't understand where they could potentially get other capital, right? So like from the perspective of the investors you work with, right? They potentially may have like a Roth 401k, or like one of those self-directed IRA accounts. That's
Yep.
one avenue. What are some other avenues that you've seen where people can use that capital and deploy it into projects such as like real estate?
Oh, so yeah, like a Roth IRA, that's self-directed IRA. That's probably one of the best lenders that you can get, because a lot of them will loan at a lower rate, and they want like longer terms too. They
Mm,
rather get out longer, like 5 years and stuff. It's funny, like there's a lot of lenders that I talk to, private lenders, and they're like, I'm gonna die before then, so let's just, I can't really make it 20 years, right? And I'm like, well, you can pass this on to your heirs. And they're like, yeah, but I don't want to have to do that. And I'd rather see it come back to me. So a lot of them, they want it longer term, but they want to see it come back to them before they die. It's conversations you have with them, but yeah, like they're the best lenders if you can get somebody with a self-directed Roth IRA. And once you learn those strategies, you can actually teach people, because I'm constantly getting my friends and teaching them all the time. And I've actually sent a lot of my friends over to an IRA provider that we both know. And she's had like really good conversations with them and converted one of them at least over there. So if you're a borrower and you learn these strategies, that's like that's a way that you can build your community of lenders, is to send them over there. But there's other people that use like HELOCs, and they'll, like for instance, in Boston, right, over the pandemic. Almost every house in the Boston area went up $100,000, right? In equity over the pandemic. So, if you're working, right, you can easily get a HELOC on your property, right? And then you can take that to loan money out as well to other people, and you can collect on the arbitrage, right? So if second position loans, if people are in trouble, sometimes you can get up to 18% on your return, or you could partner up with somebody and take a percentage of the deal. You can be the money partner and even come in and get like a 50% return on your money. But hey, with that too, you're taking on the responsibility of ownership too. So like if there's somebody slips and falls on your property, or there's a fire, or the city tags you with an unsafe violation, that's, you're a private money partner now and you're a lender, right? So a lot of times with the bigger returns, there's the bigger risk involved.
Bigger risk.
But yeah, like sometimes you can get like a good lender will, I actually myself gave somebody an 18% loan on a property because I needed the money fast, and I wanted to actually build up lenders in another community. So I actually offered an 18% loan really quick, but obviously too is like you're going to want to get in and out of those pretty quickly. And with that too, I built a great relationship with that one lender. Haven't done another loan with him, but we constantly talk about things, and I almost bought some properties off of him as well too. But yeah, so a lot of people don't know that they're millionaires. So like in Boston, there's some people that just have one like triple decker that they lived in, and then they bought a single family, and that triple decker now is like worth $1 million or 1.5 million, and they only have like a $100,000 loan that they took out back in 2009. I actually have 3 or 4 people I'm thinking about on this.
Wow.
Pull that money out, do a refinance. And back when the rates were 2, I was like, hey buddy, like three of my friends said, hey, you got to refinance. It's 2%. You're never going to see this again. And one person did, the other 2 did not. And that person's lending to me now. So the one that did refinance, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways. Sometimes people will take out business line of credit too, as well, and get like 0% rates, and then they'll use that to lend out. There is some risk to that too, because that's something that they don't have, and it's unsecured, and it can go against your personal credit, even though it's a business. It's a business credit, and then also credit cards too. It's like you're going to you might get one of those 0% balance transfers and pull money out of that, but then again, you've got to pay it back, and you make sure you're lending to someone that's going to pay you back, and it's non-usurious, and you're not at risk, because then if you can't recapture your money, you still owe that credit card too, and it's going to be hitting your credit and your debt to income ratio and stuff like that too. So,
Jeez, so good, Damien. Yeah, you mentioned three powerful tools, right, to be able to use that capital to invest. The self-directed IRAs, which are old 401ks or old Roth IRAs that just may be sitting around that you could potentially put to work. The other one is potentially a HELOC, or if you have potentially investment properties, you could cash out, refi them as well, and use that capital. And then the last one, business credit. To your point, all of these involve risk. So vetting your borrower is super important. Understanding their exit strategy on the property is super important. But Damien, tell me a little bit about how you structure your loans. You shared a little bit a few minutes ago on some of the loans you've structured on some of your properties. Let's dive into that a little bit more. What does that look like? If there was a lender that wanted to do a deal with you, how do you protect their capital?
okay. Yeah. So, I could actually take it from a couple different perspectives. So just recently, just a conversation I had with somebody, they're looking for, a second position loan on a property, right? Or, somebody has a fix and flip, for example, right? The first thing I ask them for is a pitch deck. And then when I ask for money too, is I always deliver a pitch deck. And,
Mm,
in that pitch deck, it's just gonna be a well presented, and, it could be one sheet, it could be, we've done like up to 15 on a project I was doing with other people. But basically it's gonna talk about the deal. It's gonna talk about my experience. It's gonna talk about the other properties that I own. It's gonna have, if there's any scope of work in there, scope of work and estimate, timeline. It's going to have like comparables of the property, and then it's also going to, most importantly, going to talk about how I'm going to pay them back as well too.
mm,
Is it a refinance after the project is done, which is usually my strategy. So there's a lot of people forget there can be two strategies, right? And I always hear the term exit, right? But it's people really sometimes should just use strategy or exit strategy,
yeah,
because a lot of it is like, hey, you have a strategy. You're actually trying to keep this thing. You're not
sure,
exiting out of the deal at all. This thing is going to stick around, right? Like
sure.
for example, right? Um, buy, repair, renovate, repeat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the exit strategy of the loan itself is different than the strategy of the property. So I like to have the strategy of
Mm,
the property and the exit strategy of the loan
for the
that I'm
lender.
for, right?
Mm,
So you kind of have to have those two things in there. And then also like maybe like a backup exit strategy too. Maybe you want to sell the property too. Ironically, a lot of times the appraisals come in higher if you refinance it. So, the strategies, and your profit margin could be different, depending on which you pick. And a lot of times, we talked beforehand is, you asked me about flips, and most likely I usually don't like to do flips because the profit is very low. You're paying like the short-term capital gains, and you're getting sometimes a lower price than what you would
mm.
get on the appraisal for a refinance too. So, but yeah, I usually try to keep the properties myself on them. So
Awesome, man. Well, I love the way you broke down that pitch deck, right? Because it's so important, guys. When you're either lending money or you're going to be the one that is raising that capital for your projects, yeah, make sure it's structured right and it's organized. It has a clear idea of what are all the targets, right? As far as the timeline, the exit strategy for the lender, what's the strategy for the property, what's the experience of the borrower, what type of portfolio do they have? It doesn't mean that we won't lend capital to new investors, right? But if it's not clearly stated and they can't present it like in a quick format, then yeah, that's a no-go right away, right off the top. So
yeah,
uh,
I'll mention one more thing too, reserves too. And like at different points in my time, my, career here, my journey, I've had a lot of reserves, and then I didn't have any reserves. Last year, I went to a point where I lost a partner in 2 deals, and I had to come out of pocket. And one of them was in the middle of a renovation.
Oh, no.
So I depleted my reserves on other properties. Luckily, you know, I had a good paying career and I had the reserves, which saved me. But as far as like, you know, going on to my next project, you know, I wasn't able to show, you know, a good amount of reserves, and that's definitely important to have in there. And you know, when you're using other people's money, you know, a lot of times, like, hey, like people will say, like, oh, I don't have any reserves because I'm using other people's money. But the whole point is, is if you run into some sort of a roadblock or, you know, an
Yes.
emergency, you know, we had one property I bought, they had painted the whole thing, which was kind of strange. It needed a lot of rehab. And I realized that there was like a leak in the roof where they had
Oh,
just painted.
no.
And so, you know, we had to come out of pocket for like 10 grand, you know, at the end of the day, it was my pocket, because I lost the
Mm-hmm.
time on that. I bought them out, and you know, that's definitely was not on the plan and stuff, and a big expense. We also on that project decided to rip out the entire bathroom, to just deal with a leak that we really couldn't find. So we just gutted the whole thing. And so that was a little bit of an extra expense too. So
Yeah, and that wasn't in the original scope of work, huh?
exactly. Yep. So you have to, and then your reserves too will carry you through if your project goes later. You know, if you get like a violation, and this always happens, no matter how good of a relationship you have with your contractors, there's going to be a time where there's going to be some other job done like in 3 days, and they're going to just pay the contractor like a you know, come with a suitcase of cash, and your contractor is going to be missing for a few days, and
Oh, no.
it's going to delay the project. And I had this happened to me, you know, 3 or 4 times, and you know, with contractors have had a real good relationship with, and like I like one of them didn't tell me, but all of the other ones told me, and they're like, hey, you know, you're okay with this and stuff like that. And so now if I ever use a contractor, like, you know, I'll tell them at first, it's like, hey, this is the timeline. If you ever have something come up, just like let's talk about it, you know, because
Mm.
you also want to work with them. You don't want to take money out of their pocket. And also too, they love it too when you recommend them to other people
Oh,
and
for sure. Yeah.
jobs. And one of the things too with them, a lot of contractors, is they want to keep their crew working and their crew paid, because some of their crew, they just like all they're doing is just working for you know, for this general contractor. And if this general contractor isn't paying them consistently, they'll just go to somebody else that will give them more consistent work. So you know, that's why I'm like okay with, like, you know, them doing a job. I had one contractor, I had one investor friend that asked me for a reference for a contractor I was using. And then he goes, yeah, it's probably going to take a day. He has to just pull up the carpets, put vinyl plank in some area. And then the contractor asked me in the middle of like a month project, he's like, hey, can I go over and do John's house tomorrow? You know, so I actually got him the job, and then he ditched my job for that. I was okay with it. You know, because, you know, we want to work together and we want to keep everybody working and stuff like that. So everybody was fine. And, you know, we're in the same mastermind actually too. So, yeah.
Man, yeah, you hit it on the nail with that reserves, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen, right? You mentioned about that bathroom that you guys had to tear apart and redo the whole thing. Geez, you know, and it is something as a borrower. Then if you didn't have reserves, what are you going to go tell your private money lender? I need more capital. That's so bad. That looks.
Yeah. Right. And that's the one thing I never did. I've never, so as a borrower, I've never asked for more money on a project. It's always come out of reserves or my credit card or something like that.
Yeah, man, that's such a good. Yeah, I hope all y'all taking notes. Damien's sharing some amazing information about how to ensure, you know, when you're betting a private money loan that comes across your desk, if you want to explore private money lending, or if you're raising capital for your own projects, right? What are the things that lenders are going to look for? Man, Damien, and you shared a few of your horror stories when it came to the project that you were involved with. So thanks for sharing that as well, man.
Yeah.
But
They're always,
Damien, I really, yeah, I value your time, man. And dude, this conversation's been amazing. Anything you want to share? Like, hey, as a last drop of wisdom, what can you share with somebody that's new, or that's somebody that maybe been in the business for 2-3 years that wants to level up their business and scale their business more within real estate, whether it's fix and flipping, whether it's in the lending space? What would you share?
oh, as far as scaling, I would say, you really can't scale by yourself, right? So
Mm,
right now, I'm actually at this point in time right now, I'm a lone wolf, but I had a really good business partner for 4.5 years. We recently decided to go another way after doing a workshop. We both have different views on some things, but like if you have a good partner and stuff like that, and especially for people that work that full time and they like their job. Like, I'm a software engineer. I love technology. And so right now I'm a full-time real estate investor, but for a long time I was a software engineer and I was sort of the money person
mm,
behind it. And then I partnered up with somebody that was doing real estate full time. And, we were able to get the systems down. We had up to 5 VAs at one time and
wow.
4 American workers, like acquisition specialists, disposition specialists, real estate agents on the team. And then we went into doing TC work, but definitely getting the right team together, whether it's like a personal partnership where you own the business together, or just building a loosely connected team, and then getting the systems down and the software to enable those systems and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what I would suggest. And I'm alone right now, right? But I don't suggest anybody go it alone. And I'm actually not alone because I still have agents working for me, but I like to consider them more as like you know, they're on their own, and more like a
Sure.
partnership kind of thing, rather than their work, to enable them to build their business on their own. Because a lot of times as real estate investors, we like to do our own thing, but we also like to be in a community and work with people closely. So it's either building your team that way, and just maybe having small masterminds
Hmm.
of people, which I have. I'm in like 3 masterminds. One of them is like really small. Or partnering with that person and going into the LLC with them, and doing everything together. Like, especially works good if like one person's the money person, one person's like the systems person, and usually you get together and you can grow the team really well that way. So
Yeah, that's for sure. Collaboration and being able to find that team, build that team around your business is a huge, huge,
yeah.
huge. That's for sure. Man, Damien, where can people connect with you? If they want to follow more, what type of project you're doing in the New Jersey area, or where are you currently doing projects? How can people learn more about you? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yep. So I just onboarded a bunch of properties in Salem, New Hampshire. And I'm in New Jersey, mostly North Jersey, Philadelphia, and I have one property in the Jacksonville, Florida area. But like, where people can
Wow.
connect with me virtually, Facebook is the best place to connect with me
Awesome.
there. I have an Instagram. It's Invest with Damien. I'm not really the best at putting a lot of content up there. And then I have a YouTube channel. It's called Invest with Damien as well. And hopefully I'll put some more content there as well. I'm not the best person with content, but we'll try.
Dude, that is awesome. Well, I'll definitely put that information down in the comments below. Folks, anybody that's up there in New Jersey and is checking this out and wants to connect with Damien, definitely go to his meetups. I think whenever he'll put it in his Facebook page when where he'll be at for meetups. So Damien, thanks again, my friend, for taking time away on your Friday and having this conversation. Hopefully everybody took notes and took some important information when it comes to private money lending and how to bet borrowers and how to bet deals. So for now, everybody, peace out. Thanks.
See you later. Thank you.
Give me a sec. Let me end.